Indirect Speech Act. Can you pass the salt? If you look at this sentence, if we look at the structure of the sentence, we can very easily say that it has a structure of an interrogative sentence. But I'm sure that the function of this structure is not that of a question. It seems that it is making a request. So this structure is not really asking a question about someone's ability to pass the salt on, right? We don't normally use this structure as a question at all. Rather, this structure is used to make a request. So here we say that we have a structure of an interrogative sentence, and in spite of having the function of a question, it does not have the function of a question. Rather, it has the function of an imperative sentence making a request. So, an indirect speech act, a syntactic structure associated with the function of a question, but in this case with the function of a request. So whenever a sentence of a certain structure is not having the function that it usually have, we say that it has an indirect speech act. So whenever we have the structures that we discussed while we were discussing the direct speech act, the structure of an interrogative sentence, the structure of an imperative sentence, the structure of a declarative sentence. So whenever they are not having their functions of question, of command, or of statement, so it means that they are not direct, they don't have direct act, rather they have indirect act. So you left the room open. So it's not a declarative sentence. You left the room open has an employed meaning that please close the door, it's quite cold here, right? So in this sentence, the function of a statement is not being made by declarative structure. Rather, the function is that of an imperative sentence, and which is a request. Failing to recognize another person's indirect act can create confusion. It's very important. We generally, when we are having interaction with each other, we generally do understand that what is actually being employed by a certain structure. When a declarative structure has a question, when an interrogative sentence has a request. So we do understand. So if we fail to understand, we can create certain types of confusions. So, for example, visitor, excuse me, do you know where the Ambassador Hotel is? So obviously, the structure is that of a question, but you'd agree with me that the question, it's not being, the information is not being sought from the visitor, from the passerby, by the visitor, that he wants to check his knowledge whether he or she knows the way to the Ambassador Hotel or no. So passerby, oh sure, I know where it is, and walks away. So if he does so, the passerby does so, it means that he is not taking the request clearly. He is not taking the request for the information by the visitor, and he's some sort of in a funny mood. So generally, in this structure, the passerby will tell the way to the Ambassador Hotel to the visitor. So indirect speech acts seem to be that actions such as requests presented in an indirect way are generally considered to be more gentle or more polite in our society than direct speech act. So this is the reason that we make indirect action. Instead of putting up a direct question, we or direct request. Instead of putting up a direct request, we put up a request in the structure of an interrogative sentence and seek the same request, right? For example, could you open the door for me, right? Here, the speaker has no doubt about the ability of the addressee to open that door. Actually, it's the request that is being conveyed through this structure. Open the door for me. If you look at the structure of these two sentences, the second one is exactly the structure that we generally use for making request. But if you consider the effect of the two structure, the first is more polite, right? So we use question that has more polite request to our addressee. So indirect speech act are based on some complex social assumption. So they have some complexity in their in the minds of the people, that they, instead of making direct, they feel that instead of making direct request to the people, they can make request more polite in other structures like questions.